Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo episode, and I have a topic I want to dive into around circadian rhythm and circadian health and how it can impact your body composition and some things that we can do. I think this is a very overlooked factor in today's modern environment and something that people that are focused on building muscle, losing body fat are just going to brush over, but it's really a very influential on how we feel, how our bodies respond, overall health. So it impacts a lot of things, and we'll discuss that in this episode. But first, before I go into that, I have my free body recomp checklist, and in that I go over the two different types of body recomp, why you want to focus on body composition over just scale weight, other things you need to know about what body recomp is, and then 10 things that you need for a body recomp. So if you're interested in that, go check that out. The link to that is in the show notes. Let's discuss circadian rhythms. I used to think this used to be a woo biohacker type thing, but man, once you dive into this more, you realize how it really can impact our day to day and how we really evolved with the day night cycle and how our modern environment just wrecks that, right? Especially because light has such a huge impact on our circadian rhythms, right? So our body runs on a 24-hour cycle. Now, so even if we didn't have light, most things would still run on that cycle, right? From my understanding, things are going to run potentially a little bit longer in certain people, so some people might be off just a little bit, but in general, it runs on that 24-hour cycle. And like I said, it's very influenced by light. So some things that run on a circadian rhythm that maybe people don't understand is, so something like testosterone, right? So testosterone is going to run on a circadian rhythm. You may find that it peaks at certain times and it's going to be lower at certain times, right? So that in itself runs on that circadian rhythm. And then we have cortisol and melatonin. This is probably the one that's going to impact us being able to get good sleep, feeling tired in the day, not feeling as energized. And again, cortisol is something that people think is just this negative thing, but it is, we want to have the right amount. And again, it runs on a circadian rhythm. They're inversely related. So once one's a bit higher, the other one will be lower. And there's certain things that can peak cortisol. And so once that gets high, then it will suppress melatonin, right? And then vice versa. So if we can get melatonin higher, and there's some things that you can do to get melatonin higher, that will help lower cortisol there. So again, cortisol is going to peak in the morning, and that's going to help you wake up and mobilize energy and feel good. And then as the day goes on, it should go down. Again, what you'll see in circadian dysregulation is cortisol will spike at certain times. It stays high, it doesn't go down, or it just is low or too high throughout the entire day. Or again, you'll find that it's higher at night. And that's usually people that have trouble falling asleep, things like that. And then again, melatonin is going to rise at night to promote sleep and recovery. And when melatonin's high, that will also signal to the body other things there, right? So for example, insulin sensitivity. This is going to be higher earlier in the day and it's going to be lower at night. And so what that means is we can time our food a little bit better to match them with that. And when we mismatch our food intake, that can start to impact things and maybe make things less responsive. Your thyroid's going to run on a circadian rhythm. Your immune system runs on a circadian rhythm. Like I said, gut health runs on a circadian rhythm as well too. When you're able to maybe have your best performance in the gym and be your strongest, also runs on you also find that in the middle of the day, that tends to be a bit better as well too. And again, these are all things that can impact that. And we can develop some strategies around this to make sure that our circadian rhythm is in its natural rhythm. And again, it aligns more with to work around our modern environment there. So like I said, the modern environment really wrecks this. You're looking at screens, artificial light, late meals, stress, caffeine, inconsistent sleep, right? These are all things that can impact our circadian rhythm. And it's just, if you don't pay attention to these things, you just will naturally get to this state where your circadian rhythm is dysregulated. And so you almost kind of get to this point to where either you're waking up at weird times, you don't ever really get deep quality sleep. And so you just get this like flat line across the day, right? Like your body's just confused, and that can lead to it can lead to issues of feeling tired, low energy, tough time with body composition change, digestion and gut health can be off, maybe training isn't as good. And these can all have downstream impacts on hormones, which can then influence our choices, which can also influence, for example, if we have these downstream impacts on hormones, maybe now we're not as motivated to go train. Maybe now from a thyroid perspective, that's a bit lower. So now we're not going to expend as much energy. And so then we're more likely to be in a depth maintenance or a surplus. And then when we start to gain body fat, that's going to lead to insulin resistance, which then can lead to you not feeling as good, right? And that can lead to other issues, right? So you can start to see where this just can trickle down over time. But again, if your circadian rhythm's off, your mood can be off. You're going to feel maybe tired and wired at night, or wired and tired at night. You're going to feel like super tired in the morning. You're going to feel fatigued throughout the day. And again, you're going to have, maybe you feel like you're working super hard and you're just not having those body composition change. If this is you, like, this is definitely a place where we potentially need to look at and get dialed in on. And like I said, even digestion and gut health as well too. So if you're experiencing any issues from that standpoint, we also need to look at this. If your resting heart rate's trending higher than normal, we want to look at this. If HRV is low, like these are all things that we would want to look at here with that. And like I said, the modern environment really is going to wreck this here. So again, like I said, too, some other ways that it can impact your body comp is just things are just less efficient overall, right? So you're going to be more tired, which means you're going to have less motivation. You're going to have less of a drive to push your training. So, that's going to show up as maybe you go to train, but maybe you're not able to push things like you used to in the past. And that is going to impact body composition over time. More of our choices are going to be focused on short term than long term, right? So this is going to show up as, hey, like you're going to do things that are going to get you to temporarily feel good in the short term, which is usually high dopamine type stuff. Again, not with our long term self in consideration. So again, like I said, more likely to give into food, right? Again, habits that are going to feel good in the short term, but long term aren't going to feel as good. We're just going to be less likely to make those choices when our circadian rhythm's off. You're looking at likely a lower total daily energy expenditure. Is that because dysregulation by itself? Maybe not, but it could just be, again, all those downstream impacts of, hey, now you're less motivated to go move. You're less likely to want to push training. You're more likely to be sedentary. And that all is going to impact your total daily energy expenditure. And again, those are going to have downstream impacts on our total daily energy expenditure. Appetite control is probably not going to be as good. You're probably going to have dysregulated appetite. You're going to be less likely to build muscle, which is going to impact body composition. Recovery is likely going to be a bit slower as well, too. So now you're not able to train as much. You're not able to push your training as much there. You're more likely to get sick. You're at a higher risk of that. So again, this can really have a lot of impacts when this is not dialed in. And again, is it just circadian rhythm? No. I do feel like if people are feeling this way, it's like that's at the foundation of what we need to look at to get that in line. Again, if you're overlooking this and it's, hey, any of these things are off that we're going to talk about, like this needs to be the first place. And like I said, it's just so easy in today's modern environment for somebody's circadian rhythm to be out of whack and just be off by a little bit. And over time, that's going to add up, right? Again, in the short term, it's if you do something where you have caffeine a little bit later, is that going to be problematic? Probably not. But then if we consistently do that time and time again, that's where just that small deviation off of where we want to go can start to add up when consistently done there. So I do want to talk about, there's probably 3 different types of circadian dysregulation, right? So you have one where somebody they don't fall asleep till later in the day, despite trying to go to sleep earlier. But then because of that, now it's difficult to wake up in the morning, but they're alert and productive at night, right? So like somebody might say, hey, I'm more of a night owl, right? And so if they allowed to sleep naturally, they'll go to sleep somewhere between that 12 and 4 a.m. mark, and then they'll wake up 10 to noon, right? Again, this is definitely something like teenagers, right? That's how they want to wake up a little bit later. But again, you'll see adults that do this as well too, right? So that's one type of circadian dysregulation, right? And then we have another one here that's going to be someone that they go to sleep very early and they wake up super early. This is probably less common, but you'll definitely see that, right? So again, somebody is going to be in bed by between 6 and 8 p.m. and then they're going to wake up at 3 to 4. So they're going to be early in the day on there. And then you're going to have the third one, which is just going to be like a low amplitude overall. And so this is probably where most people are at, right? So that low amplitude being like the circadian signals are just not strong either way. And this is again where most people are going to fall, where that signal just is not super strong there. And there's going to be individual differences here, right? Like I do think some people are naturally going to want to wake up a little bit earlier. Some people are going to naturally want to stay up a little bit later. There's not like a set time here with this. Again, it should be close to the natural day and night cycle. Again, that can get out of whack and during different seasons where you live at specifically, right? But again, some people will be a little bit earlier, some people will be a little bit later there. However, I do think no matter what, shifting too far away can be problematic no matter what. Again, if you're looking at you're up between the hours of 12 and 5, that's going to be the kind of problem areas that we would need to look at no matter what, even if you are considered a night owl, right? Yeah. And so again, with the low amplitude one, that's usually going to come with other issues, right? There's going to be other poor lifestyle practices, high body fat levels, poor metabolic health. That's where that's going to show up. But then also age. So as you age, the amplitude of the circadian rhythms does decrease, making sure we're staying in line with that. But definitely as we age, that can start to impact things. Stress as well too can impact this and make the amplitudeness, the signal of it much, much lower there. And I think the low amplitude too would also be jet lag as well too, changing that. Social jet lag as well, essentially being, hey, you have to have a certain time during the week, and then on the weekends that is completely different. That's going to be another person that shows that low amplitude. And then any gut issues, things like that, high stress load, like that's going to be a low sort of amplitude person there. Yeah. So again, a few things that we can do. So if you're that early person, let's talk generally what's going to help set your circadian rhythm up. And then we'll go through each one of those and be like, hey, here's the things that you need to focus on a little bit more there. So what are the biggest mistakes that I see and issues with circadian rhythm that I see with my clients? And so first, it's not getting outside at all, but especially in the morning, right? So morning sunlight is going to be best here for this, but getting outside at some point during the day still matters, even in the winter. And it also doesn't have to be sunny. So just getting outside is going to be the most important thing here. And again, trying to do that as early as you can in your day. If you're not able to do that, bright light therapy could be something that helps some people, right? In that situation, to be able to get that and get that light, that bright light as early as you can. But getting outside overall. And again, this is a tough thing for people you don't see this as much because we're inside, right? We're always inside in today's modern environment. So you have these lights that are there. They're not particularly strong enough during the day, but then they're too strong at night. And so you get this flatlining and that low amplitude over time there. Again, getting outside, getting that bright light, again, just even if it's cloudy, like it can be super beneficial to do that. So the next thing we're looking at here is too much caffeine or caffeine too late in the day. Again, this is typically the person that's going to be like, oh, I can drink caffeine, I don't feel it, and I'm fine. It doesn't matter. Nothing's going to crush your sleep more than caffeine too late in the day. For some people, even this could be as early as 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. is too late for some people, right? Something like birth control can expand increase the half-life of caffeine, right? There's other things that genetics can increase that. Some people are just considered slow metabolizers. And so they're going to have to cut that caffeine intake off earlier than other people. But I think in general, probably cutting it off between 12 and 2 most days is going to be where we would want to go. And again, there's going to be some things that do have some caffeine in them, like chocolate, for example, is going to have a little bit of caffeine. Look out for your teas there, diet sodas, energy drinks. Those are all going to have caffeine, and we need to be careful with taking those too late in the day. Now, again, with this, the more you have it closer to sleep, the more you have overall, and the more you have closer to sleep, the more problematic it's going to be. So if you don't ever have any caffeine and you have a piece of chocolate at 2 p.m., you're fine. If you had 3 energy drinks and then you have a couple pieces of chocolate at night, that's probably going to start to impact you a bit more, right? So we need to look at it from that standpoint there. But again, too much caffeine or too much caffeine overall or too late in the day will wreck your circadian rhythm there. Too much bright or blue light in the evening. Like I said, not getting enough light earlier in the day is problematic, but then getting too much at night can become problematic. So we really want to look at turning off our overhead lights. So if you can have more of a lamp, less brightness in a lamp that is not overhead, or light that's overhead, that's going to be better, right? Use night light on your screens. Reduce brightness on them. Definitely no phone in your bed there. I think that's one of the biggest things that when I ask people, it's like, oh yeah, I do have my phone in my bed. It's like, all right, we definitely need to cut that out. I used to have my laptop in my bed to watch something before I went to sleep. And again, probably too much. I would turn down the brightness and get the night mode on, but still, that's still probably a bit too much in bed there. So again, turning off overhead lights, use a night light on your screens, reduce brightness, and then no phone in bed there. Irregular sleep and wake times. Again, you don't necessarily have to sleep and wake at the exact same time every day, but the closer you can keep that, the better it's going to be. So the closer that the more regular you can get that from day to day, the better off you're going to be. When we start to do this, where you shift it, you go to sleep a little bit later, you wake up a little bit later, this is going to start to have impacts on, you're not going to get that deep sleep that you need at night to help with recovery and for looking at body composition there. So again, we want to make sure that if we typically go to bed at 10, I want to try to aim to be within an hour plus or minus of that. And then same thing with the wake time. Make sure, you're not, again, this comes back to the social jet lag concept where let's say you typically go to sleep at 10 during the week, wake up at 6 or 5, but then on the weekend you're up till 2 or 3, and then you don't wake up till noon. It's like, okay, one day of doing that, not problematic. But when you do that regularly, that's where you're going to run into some issues there. And again, for changing that sleep and wake time, like that's going to have downstream impacts on your circadian rhythm and obviously what your body can expect to do each day and everything like that. And then again, very large meals late at night. Try and eat more earlier in the day when you can and less closer to sleep. Again, same thing here with this. One night, not a big deal. But if you always have over 50% of your calories too late, your circadian rhythm is going to be impacted, right? Because we talked about how your gut health runs on a circadian rhythm. And so digestion is not as good at night. And then insulin sensitivity is not as good at night. So your body's not going to handle that food as well. And then this can start to impact your sleep. And then so now you have those issues of now we're not getting good sleep. So again, we need to make sure that we have more of our meals earlier in the day. The only time I would say that I think food choice matters. I think if you do high protein fairly close to bed, I think you're fine. If you do a bunch of cookies before bed, again, that's probably going to start to impact your sleep a bit more. And then I think one exception to this too is someone who is lean and been dieting for a while. You may find that some carbohydrates fairly close to bed can actually help with your sleep. I do think it depends on where someone's at from a body comp and calorie standpoint, but that would be the only sort of exception to that. Otherwise, I think you want to try and keep your food as far away from sleep as possible. Alcohol, stimulants, or rec drug use, try and keep as far away from your sleep as possible. A popular one is THC, right? It's okay. We'll take THC and alcohol. So with THC, it's, hey, it helps me fall asleep. Same thing. It's going to impact your deep sleep. So try and keep that as far away from your sleep as possible, even if it does help you fall asleep. And then same thing with alcohol, right? Again, alcohol can help people feel tired. It can help make you sleepy, but again, it's going to wreck your sleep quality. So same thing there. You want to try and keep it as far away from your sleep as possible. Like I said, they make you sleepy, but they wreck sleep quality there. And then another thing that's going to impact circadian rhythm is going to be high stress in the evening with no downshift routine. If you're working right up until bed, you're watching stuff that triggers you, content, news right before sleep, you're going to impact your circadian rhythm. So we need to make sure that if we try and avoid super stressful things right before bed, within reason, right? There's obviously going to be things that happen that we don't always have full control over. But if you're constantly working right up until bed, you're in that heightened state, or you're constantly watching news that triggers you, or social media that triggers you, those are things that we have within our control that we can fix there. And again, same thing with this too. One night, not going to be problematic. It's just when we do this consistently. And this comes back to the modern environment where we're constantly stimulated. It's going to be hard to get into that downregulated state. And then now we don't get as good of, I guess this is a good time to bring this up of how this could show up is now you don't get as good deep sleep. So now you're more tired the next day. So then you nap for a couple hours, right? Or you sleep in, and then now you stay up later, and now you're not getting bright light in the morning because you're sleeping, right? And so you can just see where this starts to stack on top, and it just becomes flatlined essentially. And then all those downstream impacts that you're going to have from that. Movement and exercise, right? So lack of exercise or movement will certainly impact your circadian health. So if we're not moving, like we definitely need to make sure we do that, because that's going to help set your circadian rhythm. It's going to help with the amplitude of it. But we also need to be careful with higher intensity exercise too close to bed, because if we start to do that, is also going to push back your circadian rhythm, right? And again, one time, not going to be problematic. It's when we do it regularly. So again, in this situation, same thing, right? Maybe you're someone who you didn't realize this, and well, one, maybe you don't move as much. And so again, now we don't have as strong of signals from a circadian rhythm standpoint. So that can done consistently, that can start to lower the amplitude of your circadian rhythm. But then maybe you're someone who you're working out super intense right before bed. Now that's going to push things back. And then just like with the stress side of things, that can start to add up over time there. And I would say the biggest thing here that I can say with this is, because when I bring this stuff up to clients, the most common thing I hear is, I already do all this. It's fine. I don't need to focus on this. And it's myself included. Everyone has at least one or two of these things that you can improve. And you need to come at it from that mindset. If you come at it from oh, hey, I already do this. It's not a big deal. I already nail these things. I get to bed at 10. I'm good. Like you're shooting yourself in the foot. Like you need to look at what are the 1 to 2 things that I can improve upon and focus on, right? Fixing your circadian health doesn't mean perfection, but it does mean tightening up your biggest leaks so your body responds to the work you're actually putting in there. And again, just to look at a few of these people. So with the amplitude things, the low amplitude, all the things I just talked about are going to be super helpful, right? Like getting that bright light in the morning, cutting off caffeine intake earlier in the day, reducing blue light exposure at night, getting into a good wind down routine, potentially taking some melatonin around in the evening to help set that, avoiding exercise too late in the day, watching your meal timing, right? Trying to move that to earlier in the day. Those would be things to help strengthen that amplitude of your circadian rhythm. If you're someone who you tend to stay up later in the day, so again, you stay up late, you're having trouble, you're high stimulation at night, you're not tired, you feel like super alert and focused at night, and then you want to sleep in. Again, what we woget is light would be super important for this person. Watching blue light at night, really reducing brightness, trying to cut out as much as you can at night, get that bright light early in the day when you first wake up as well too. Like that's what I would do with this person specifically. And again, also cutting off their caffeine earlier in the day, cutting off food intake to earlier in the day. Those would be things that you'd want to move up there with that. If you're someone who you fall asleep, you want to fall asleep later and then sleep in. Now, if you're someone who you don't like that you go to bed, like you get super tired too early and then you wake up super early, if you want to push things back, you would do things a little bit different than what you would tell other people, making sure that you force yourself to stay up a little bit later. That's one thing that you can do. So you're just restricting yourself initially, right? So just going to bed a little bit later, potentially exercising a little bit later in the day, that can help, right? Because again, you're pushing that circadian rhythm back. And then light, like you would almost want to have bright light a little bit later in the day to help keep you up there. just to reset. Now, you wouldn't want to do that all the time, but just to reset and get you back on track if you're someone that doesn't like going to bed early and waking up early there. So again, think of this as really just the foundation and base of, if you can nail this, like everything is just going to be better, right? Your body's going to run more optimally. Everything's going to come with less friction. At least put us in a position for things to have less friction, right? I guess one thing that I did forget to mention with the low amplitude is if there are any other underlying issues, right? So if someone is obese, if someone has insulin resistance, if someone has gut issues, high inflammation, like you would want to work on those things as well too, right? Because that's going to help strengthen the circadian rhythm amplitude. Now it's like they're going to have synergistic effects, right? Where if you work on circadian rhythm stuff, that's going to help put them in a better position to fix those things, but also doing practices that are going to help fix those things will help get their circadian rhythm dialed in. So it is synergistic from that standpoint. But again, if we can get this dialed in, you're looking at more stable energy. You're looking at a stronger libido. You're looking at easier fat loss, calmer mood, better training recovery, fewer cravings, better focus. You're just going to feel better overall. And again, it's going to feel, I always say client A who is feeling good versus client B who maybe is doing things right, but does not feel good. Like the person that feels good is going to see better results all long term because they feel good. And this is one of these easy things that we can do to help put us in that position to set us up to be more successful. But again, I think that if we come at body comp change, performance, and we're not in our circadian rhythms out of whack, you just have to understand that, again, there's probably going to be some people genetically that it's not going to impact as much. But for most people, we're not going to be able to fully maximize our potential if this is off. So I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you guys have any questions on this topic. If you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. That's where I'm most active on social media. And then if you could leave a rating and review for this podcast so more people can find it, appreciate it. And I'll talk to you guys soon.